Thanks everybody for joining today. My name is Tyrone Siren. I'm the head of US Immigration at Holborn Assets. And today we're going to talk about the EB-5 program. We're joined by our very special guest and business partner, Ken Frost from Calvary Water Recycling and the Great Southwest Regional Center. He's going to discuss the actual project today. So today, since we have a guest here, an expert on not only EB-5 but also on the investment project itself, I want to let him focus on the project. I'm going to do a brief introduction to Holborn, some of our services, a little bit about EB-5, the EB-5 process, and then I'm going to let kind of Ken join in, talk a little bit about his project, or a lot. And there's a lot of kind of hot topics out there in U.S. immigration, and so I'd also like this to be an opportunity for everyone who joined to ask their questions, because some of them will be able to answer better than others, because it is kind of a ever-changing landscape right now. But I think it's certainly worth dispelling some of the myths that might be out there in the media, and trying to show that EB-5, regardless of what might be in the news or some comments made by the administration, is still one of the most viable paths to get to America. And I think it's the fastest still. So, and that's important if things might change in the future. So let's get started. Let's see. I'd like to make this a little bigger. So, as I said, today's agenda will just be a bit about the EB-5 program, some of the process and benefits, some of the investment options, and then we'll open things up for discussion. A bit about myself. I joined Holborn in 2020, 5 years ago. And but I've been in the U.S. immigration and immigration industry in general since 2008. Through almost 2 decades now, I've helped more than about 1,000 families, almost 2,000 families. And at Holborn, we've helped dozens of families through the EB-5 process. A bit about Holborn itself. Holborn is a full-service immigration company, although I focus on EB-5 and another program in the U.S. called EB-3. We do offer a range of programs, such as citizenship programs in the Caribbean, predominantly in the Caribbean. For example, Grenada, St. Lucia. These countries offer kind of a fast track to citizenship, whereas our residency programs, our most popular program is probably the U.S. and Portugal. They offer kind of a stepping stone to citizenship, but also direct pathways. All these programs are excellent programs. Kind of depends a little bit on what you need and what your goals are, what your family's goals are. So if U.S. isn't quite the right program for you, do still reach out to us, because we can probably find a program that does fit your needs. So let's talk about EB-5. EB-5 is an employment-based number 5 visa program that leads to permanent residency and eventually citizenship. It's been, over the years, one of the most popular programs in the world, if not one of the most popular program in the world. It was created in 1990, and there's been a few changes over the years, but it's a pretty stable program. It really kind of took off in about 2008. That's when I got involved. And it went from just a few hundred people around the world to more than 10,000 people per year using it. In 2020 and 2021, the program went through I'd say it didn't really change. The amount changed. The amount of investment changed. That was one of the biggest things, and also just the quality of the process changed. But it improved considerably, and that's something we'll talk a little bit about today, because Mr. Frost's project is really a project that benefited from some of these changes. Being a rural program, it gets fast-tracked, or your petition gets fast-tracked through the program. So some key requirements for EB-5 is that it's $800,000 a minimum of $800,000. And if you invest into a rural area, you get priority processing. Outside of that, there's not many requirements except for you have to show where you got your money, lawful source of funds. They want to just be able to see if you earned it through, through income, through, sale of real estate. And then you also need to be working with an approved regional center in the US. Okay, so the great attractive features about the program are that you can include your spouse, your unmarried children under the age of 21. You do not actually have to work in the U.S. Most anyone qualifies as long as you have the money, which of course is a big qualification. But it's every country in the world is still welcome to apply. There's no particular waiting lists, and as we'll discuss, we are seeing approvals in as little as 4 months. And that's been our fastest, but you can certainly expect approvals in less than 12. With concurrent processing, if you happen to live in the U.S. on a valid visa, you can file your case and then receive all of the benefits of a green card within just a couple months. So it's really a very flexible program. Most people qualify for it. It's family-based, so you can bring your family, your spouse and your children. And remember, it's an investment, so it's not a donation, although it's a fair amount of investment. As Ken Frost will discuss, you receive a return on your money, and also, potentially your money returned. So that's the basics of the EB-5 program. There's a few steps, but for the most part, it's pretty clear. You sign up with Holborn. We introduce you to a lawyer, or if you have a lawyer, we're happy to work with that lawyer as long as they have experience in EB-5. You review the project, the Calvary Water Recycling Project. And, as we said, anywhere from as little as 4 months, but certainly less than a year, you should get an initial conditional green card approved. Now, there's one caveat. You must keep your investment at risk and in the project for at least 2 years. Actually, it works out about 2.5. And then once you can show that and all the necessary requirements like job creation have been met, then you'll receive your unconditional green card, or what's called an 829. So, the entire process from today until you actually, you get your first green card, your conditional green card, probably about a year. And within, about 2.5 to 3 years, you should be able to get a permanent green card, an unconditional green card. So the process moves along very quickly. You get benefits if you're in the U.S. within a few months. If you're outside the U.S. in probably about a year. So there's really no other program like it. Certainly not in America like it. And I don't know if there's another program in the world. And, I work with all the programs in the world, basically, that moves this quickly and gives such a large benefit. And, just one thing I should step back for a moment. One important thing is that we should discuss what a green card is, just briefly. Just so you know that it's a bit different than, some of the residency programs in Europe. A green card is full permanent residency with a direct pathway to citizenship. It allows you to work in the U.S., live in the U.S., travel in and out of the U.S. Your children can go to school for free at public schools. You'll get local tuition rates at the college and university levels. So it offers a lot of benefits. And then most importantly, you can apply for citizenship after 5 years. So unlike the programs in Europe, which I do like very much, those are temporary residency programs that lead to permanent. Some of them lead to permanent residency, and some can lead to citizenship, but none of them as quickly as EB-5. EB-5 is very much designed to get families permanent residency and stabilized immigration quickly. So, with that, I'm going to kind of hand things over to Ken Frost, and he'll discuss a little bit about himself, the basic structure of his investment project, EB-5 project, and some of the benefits of it, and then we will discuss some kind of the hot topic issues that might be on your minds, and which should be, because there's some very important ones out there right now. So with that, Ken, I'll turn it over to you. Again, just a brief introduction. Ken Frost is the CEO and founder of the Great Southwest Regional Center, which is the entity that actually does the immigration work. It handles the immigration EB-5 process. And then also the Calvary EB-5 Water Recycling Project, which is the actual investment project where your money will be invested and go to work to create jobs and revenue. So, Ken, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tyrone. Just to give you a little of my background, I spent 30 years in the financial world working for major Wall Street companies. I started way back in 1984 with Dean Witter, which is now Morgan Stanley. Worked with Payne Weber, which is now UBS. All the names have changed. My final position was with Bank of America, broker-dealer, as a senior VP. So I had 30 years of investment background, and started looking at the EB-5 program around 2009, decided to establish a regional center. We applied in 2010. It took about 2 years to get the designation. And so we were designated as a regional center in 2012. So we've been in the industry for about a total of 15 years. We're working now on our 6th project. All of them are very specialized. We decided, rather than jumping around to different industries, that we'd focus on one industry. That industry is related to the oil and gas industry in Texas. And I'll go into a little more detail about the project, but I wanted to make a few points about EB-5 in general. One of the things I wanted to mention about the initial green card that you get, it's called a conditional green card, but you get all of the privileges up front of the permanent green card. Excuse me. The only caveat is that a little less than 2 years into it, you will apply for the removal of the conditions. And those conditions are just a look back to make sure that the project is following the business plan, the economic study that verifies the job creation, and just a look back that everything went the way it was supposed to, and then they remove the conditions. So you have a permanent green card. But you do get all those privileges on the front end. Regarding the EB-5 world, we're going through a very interesting time right now. It's different than anything I've seen in the last 15 years. They revamped the program in 2022 and came up with a new law that covered a lot of the negative aspects of EB-5, made it much safer for the investors, required a lot of oversight. For example, the projects now have to have what's called a third-party administrator, which for all intents and purposes, they're doing almost a real-time audit as the funds are used for a project. So in our project, when an investor puts $800,000 in, it goes into an escrow account. That account is managed with our company on the account, and also a law firm that serves as a more or less a trustee monitoring everything. So when we're going to take money from the EB-5 entity and put it into the project, we have to show them exactly what category it's going into. They have a blueprint of our economic study, our business plan, everything's coded. We present exactly where, let's say we're going to draw out $200,000 of the 800 to deploy into the project. It'll show exactly which use of funds they are. This has to be done, but it's kind of a drawdown. We draw down the money. Once we've deployed the money, we then have to come back and show receipts, bank records, canceled checks, wire transfers, invoices, paid invoices. So you know that your money's going where it's supposed to go. This has pretty much eliminated any type of fraud situation of people misappropriating or not handling the funds properly. one of the big changes going on right now is when they passed the law, they designated the EB-5 program for a 5-year period. It was 2022, and they designated it to have a sunset clause in 2027. So we're just beginning the 4th year. It's based on the government fiscal year, which ends every year on September 30th. One thing that's extremely important for you to consider if you're looking at EB-5 is there's a kind of a drop dead date of September 30th, 2026. So that means that what would that be? We're like 11 months or 10 months away from that time period. So you have a 10-month period that you're protected. If you initiate your EB-5 submission, you're protected in many respects. Number one, the price is locked in, the $800,000. Number two, all the terms that you follow, everything remains the same, and you're protected, so that even as of September 2026, the USCIS has quite a bit of leverage in making policy decisions. So a lot of it's up to their discretion. For example, they can raise the price. They can also, just change some of the rules. And so even though the program is going to perpetuate through 2027, September 30th, if I were in a position where I was thinking of a green card, I would make sure I got it done in the next 10 months. And probably the earlier the better because of this deadline. And then probably the most important catalyst is that there's what's called a COLA factor, where as of September 2026, they can backdate for a 5-year period the inflationary numbers and use that to increase the price. Now, no one knows exactly what that would be, but the estimates from experts are it would be somewhere in the range of $950,000 to $1,050,000. So it's a substantial $100,000 to perhaps $200,000 increase in the investment amount on an EB-5. So I think it's a very important consideration. Also, because of those reasons and all the fact that there's been some real dynamic changes in some of the other visa programs in the United States, it's created kind of what we are calling a EB-5 tsunami. The biggest factor, I think, is the H-1B changes that are taking place. The current administration has changed the rules on H-1B. It's made it much less predictable. The existing H-1B visa holders are protected for the time being, but any new H-1B applications, and there's usually about 80,000 plus a year that have been coming in. It's said that there's about 600,000 to 700,000 H-1B visa holders in the United States right now. So when their visa expires, there's also some uncertainty if they're going to have to follow the new rules or if they'll be protected. And the new rules state that when you're applying for a new H-1B visa now, they have a fee of $100,000 up front. Not only that, but the companies that hire them have to pay an annual amount of $100,000 to employ them. So this is kind of I don't know if you'd say polite or impolite way of saying they're not too keen on more H-1B visas. So it's changing the dynamics. And a lot of these people that are in that situation have families in the U.S. They're been on their jobs 5 years, 10 years. Their kids are in school, and it creates an uncertainty where they don't have much of a choice except to ride it out, not knowing what their future is going to be like, or if they're able to invest in an EB-5 visa, this solves the problem permanently for them. And not only does it solve it, being inside the U.S., what Tyrone mentioned, that you can do what's called concurrent filing. Let's say that you're on the long end of how long it takes you to get that EB-5, 12 months, or actually the longest we've had on our newest project under the new program is 11 months. We've had several recently that got their approvals in 4 to 4.5 months. So it's moving very quickly. Now, another thing that's going on is there's a lawsuit against USCIS where they determined that they inappropriately and dramatically raised all the fees for EB-5. To give you an example, when we do a brand new project, we have to pay a fee. It used to be, what was it, Tyrone? Before it was $3,000 or $4,000. Then they raised it to $17,000. Oh, it used to.
It was
Oh,
free at
you're
one
an old
point.
timer. It was free. I don't remember that. But anyway, they raised it from 17, almost 18,000 to almost 48,000. Pretty dramatic increase. Well, it turns out they really didn't have the full authority to do that. So there's been a order placed by a federal judge that for the time being they have to revert back to the prior fees that were in place before, what was it, before November 2024, I think, is the fee structure that they had. And for the EB-5 investor, this is somewhat meaningful. It's not major, but the current fee up until recently, up until like just a few weeks ago, was $11,160 to file the I-526. That's what you pay as an investor. You pay almost a little over $11,000. They reverted it back that you have a window now for the time being of $3,675. So it's just under $7,500 you save. And this isn't going to last forever. They will be able to raise the fees, but not as drastic as what took place already, recently. And it'll take them several months to do that. Nobody knows exactly how long, but it looks like it'll be sometime in the first quarter. Even it could be as early as January, probably be more in the middle to the end of the first quarter. But at that point in time, they're going to go to another fee structure, which won't be as crazy as the one that they did in 2024, but it'll be higher than it is now. So that creates, a small savings, but every little bit helps when you're putting together a almost $900,000 investment when you count all the attorney's fees and filing fees and everything that goes with it. Now, I'm going to move on to our regional center and the project itself. As I mentioned, we were approved as a regional center in 2012. When they did the new law in 2022, we had to go in and become redesignated as a regional center. And they charged us another hefty fee to do that, even though we'd already been in business for, 12 years. So we received our redesignation, and then we put our newest project, our sixth project. I want to mention that our 5 earlier projects, we have an excellent track record on the success rate of getting the green card and also getting the removal of conditions. Our first 5 projects, all investors, 100%, have received their green cards. There's one project that was later in the game. It started right about the same time as COVID, and all of those investors received their green card in the fall of 2024. And so they're coming up this next year. They'll be ready to do the 829s. So they haven't met that 2-year requirement before they send the removal of conditions in. All of the investors that received their green cards in the first 4 projects also have received the removal of their 829 conditions. So we have, a perfect track record. There's a few investors we've had that didn't follow through on their own. Some of them were medical people that had applied 10 years earlier for another special pathway to get a green card. So they received their green card almost unpredictably earlier than the time period that we took. So they did not need 2 green cards, but we've had no turn downs or failures on getting the green card. So our project also, the new project, our 6th project, the one that's currently available, received what's called an I-956F approval. Very, very important. If you're looking at other EB-5 projects from anyone, it's very important to know that the regional center has either received I-956Fs on their recent projects or have applied for it with a very high expectation. You're going to know pretty much in advance if you're getting approved, because they're just going to look at the business plan, the economic study, check all the boxes, and then you get that approval. Now, what's cool about having that I-956F approval is when you invest in the project, your approval likelihood is almost a certainty. It is absolutely a certainty as far as the project goes. The only variables would be your own source of your funds, the pathway of the funds, and your background check. So it's all on the investor, and they know if their funds are good. They know if their background is good. So you can invest in a project with I-956F approval, and as long as you're comfortable with yourself, you can have almost a near perfect estimate that you're going to get approved. So that's very important. So moving over to the project itself, we're in a very unique space. We were doing rural projects from the very beginning. Tyrone, I don't know how many you had heard of over the years. I could almost count them on one hand. Maybe there was a dozen rural projects, but some of them never got off the ground. Right. But as far as getting approvals and going the full gamut in the EB-5 world, maybe, definitely less than a dozen. So we were one of them that had experience with a rural project. A lot of the rural projects out there, you have to be a little careful because some of them are kind of on the edge. What they like to do, there's a lot of real estate developments that are just outside of metropolitan statistical areas. And they do that because they're within a commuting range of, if it's single family home development or apartment complex or whatever, then these people are within a commute of going to a bigger city in a metropolitan area, MSA. MSA negates it being a real project. So they're just outside that border. So you want to be a little careful about that because those things could change. We operate strictly in about as rural of an area as you could get. We're in the Permian oil basin in far west Texas. It's almost like a desert land. There's one MSA out there, which is Midland, Odessa, about the total of about 300,000 people. We have no projects that are within that MSA, but the majority of all the counties in that oil basin have very low populations. We have one county that has less than 100 people. It's one of the least populated counties in the United States. And actually, Tyrone, I don't know if I haven't told you this, it just came over the news. They listed the 5 or 6 the most wealthy cities in Texas. And you've got Houston, Dallas, et cetera, Austin. And Mentone and Loving County, which has a population of less than 100, had the highest per capita income of any city in Texas with less than 100 people. The average per capita income is $650,000 in that county. So they have very few people, but they have over 5,000 oil workers that are in that county spending the night and working remotely from where they live. So anyway, just a little bit more about our actual project. We're not in the oil and gas business. We're related to it, and we have a service company that handles water. We dispose of the water that's when they frack a well or drill a well. There's a tremendous amount of water that comes up out of the ground. It's salt water, and it's coming from anywhere from 7,000 feet to maybe 15,000 feet deep. Used to be a saltwater sea out in this basin. And each barrel of oil that comes up produces anywhere from 5 to 7 barrels of salt water. So our job is to handle that water. The traditional way is they have what they call saltwater disposal wells, which are kind of like an oil well, but they're just drilled to push the water back where it came from after we've cleaned it up and removed all the oil. And it's kind of cool because when the oil companies bring the water to our facilities, they bring it by either truck or pipeline. And once we accept the water, everything in the water belongs to us. We charge them to take the water. In that water, the oil companies leave a small percentage, maybe 1 or 2% is oil that they move so fast, they only get about 98% of the oil out of there. So we charge them to take it, then we clean it up to the state that it was in when they took it when it came out of the ground, and then we put it back where it came from. So we get to keep the oil. So we're able to put oil in tanks, have trucks come and pick it up, sell it in the oil market, and that's kind of like the icing on the cake for us. It really enhances our profitability, and that's how we can afford to pay more on a dividend or interest than other EB-5 projects. We pay an annual 5% on our project. So at the end of your first year, it's annual. You'll receive a $40,000 check each year while you're in the program. Our exit strategy, when you have the likelihood of having your money paid back, there's a later date when you're certain that you're going to get your money paid back, but we like to do a shorter term exit targeted at 3.5 years. And what we do is we have what's called a put option. This is something I learned on Wall Street, is that we have the right to buy you out at anywhere from 3.5 to 5 years in the investment. When we buy you out, it has to be for $1 million minus the dividends you've received. So, for example, if you had received 3 of those $40,000 checks, that's $120,000. We would have to pay you an additional $880,000, and in 3.5 years, you would have received your money plus $200,000, and that equates to a little bit over a 7% return. So, I don't think you're going to find other EB-5 projects. There may be a few that approach the 4 or 5%, but 7% is unheard of, and most of the projects range in the 1 to 3% area. So let me see what else. We're kind of we're not a green project. I call us a light green project because we're about as green as you can get dealing in the oil business, and so we're proud of that. And we also we own our properties, so there is real estate aspect to our project. Also, very important, we don't take on any debt. We have our project currently is a $40 million project. Half of that is EB-5 money. We have spaces for 25 EB-5s. It looks like on this project will probably be fully subscribed sometime late in the first quarter or early in the second quarter of 2026. The other 20 million is equity that we put up ourselves, our partners, our colleagues, some of the wealthy people in the oil business that understand our business. And without having debt, the safety factor, even though we're small compared to some of the EB-5 projects that are hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. And however, I think the safety factor is unique because we put the EB-5 investor in a first lien position. So we create $40 million worth of assets. And if something goes wrong, if there was a failure, then they're going to have first of all, the liquidation of the real estate out there that we bought has just gone through the roof. And the value of the buildings, the equipment the equipment has a long lifespan. So there's a lot of hard assets involved in our business. So that gives you a safety. If there's something occurred where there was a failure, you're going to be the liquidation would recoup your investment first before any of the other $20 million of investors get their money. So that creates a very safe situation. I think that covers most of the main points. Can you think of something I've left out, Tyrone, that you would like to add? And then we can maybe open it up to some questions.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you did. Thanks. I think it was a very good job giving an overview of some of the current drivers maybe that might motivate people to invest in the EB-5 now, as well as the unique aspects of your project. So we can open it up for a few questions. We've had some sent in. I was looking over here because I have them written. I have them on my phone over here. So I guess, there's one general topic I think that if we discuss, we'll probably cover 2 or 3 of these questions that we have here. And that is, given that this particular administration is prone to make sudden announcements, and particularly in the last week, there's been a pretty dramatic one saying that's, people from what they call third world countries would not be eligible for immigration at all. Where does that? Because we do have a couple clients on the here from Africa that might probably fall into that list. What is your opinion on them actually banning certain countries from immigration, and EB-5 particularly? Do you think EB-5 is going to just kind of power through it because it's such a major investment, or what are your thoughts on that, Ken?
Well,
That's kind of a challenging question, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't really have the answer because it's so new, but
Right.
I would say based on past experience, Trump likes to shock and awe and then tend to back off a little bit on leaving out some of the details of what's being said. A good example would be the golden visa and now the platinum visa. Okay. I remember when the Secretary of Commerce was on the announcement with Trump saying, we're going to have a golden visa in 2 weeks. It's $5 million. We have hundreds of thousands of people that already want them. And it's going to replace the EB-5 program. Okay. And of course, I think it was a Sunday night. And I kind of said, what? That kind of affects our business. You gave us a 2-week notice. That's very nice. And so then later you find out, first of all, that there's no authority for them to replace the EB-5 program. It's a law that's been passed by Congress in order to replace the EB-5 program, that it would require a new law by Congress, which would take a vote in the Senate of over 60 yays, and they're having trouble getting more than 53 at the most. We saw that with the government shutdown, how that worked out. And so now they've kind of pushed the gold card off into more of a future thing. I think they very well may go through with it, but I'm going to hit on the gold card at the same time and answer your question because it's kind of a sore subject.
That's one of my questions too. So
yeah, and then they've changed the gold card to a $1 million investment. And then now that's the platinum card that will be 5 million. And the benefit of the 5 million is, first of all, super high net worth wealthy individuals would be the only ones that have a spare 5 million laying around. And secondly, the only really profound benefit is that they're saying that they would be waive worldwide taxation on their income. That's a big deal because someone worth $100 million that's making 10 or 15, $20 million a year in worldwide income does not want to pay U.S. taxes on that now or ever. Okay. So it has a very unique place that may materialize, but nothing like the original announcement. And then the $1 million new gold card, they've changed it from 5 to 1 million. If you can imagine, you have $1 million of cash and you pile it into a pile and you put some lighter fluid on it and you set it on fire. That's what you're doing with that $1 million investment, because it's a gift. It's a donation to the U.S. Treasury. And then you probably would be able to get the card fast. And, some people may have a situation where that fits them, but it does not anywhere near compare with the green card program, which is a proven, predictable, in the law where it can't be changed at least for the near term. And so I think the idea of the third world countries, if I had to guess, the countries that are not our true adversaries are probably going to be out of luck. But the other countries that are, growing and full of a lot of, stand-up quality citizens, I don't see them eliminating the permanent residency option. But, it's yet to be determined.
Okay, we have a question here from Tony. He just wanted a little clarification on, just go back to, this is kind of a follow-up, I guess, on the what makes the green card, the EB-5 unique. Could you explain the return on your investment again? Because as you said, at one point you say it's 5%, then at another point you say 7%. So maybe just talk through. I know what the answer is, but maybe you just talk through it one more time, just to help clarify.
Anybody that's
the
interested in
investment
our
period.
project, anyone that's really interested in our project, we'll go through step by step because there's several stages. There's a later stage where the project is obligated to return your investment at 800,000, just like a loan model. Okay. And it's very simple. If that takes place, after the 5 years is up, we have a 2-year extension where if things are slower than we thought they would be, or we don't, there's some unforeseen circumstances, not a failure, but just a delay, then we have the right to extend for 2 years at 5%, and then the money is obligated to be paid back in full, the 800,000 at the end of that 2-year extension. So your worst case scenario is it stretches out to a 7-year program where you get your money back, plus you have made 5% along the way. Now, the period that we're focused on, hey, I'm 74 years old. I don't really want to exit in 7 years. I'm looking at more like 3 to 4 years. 3.5 is our target. So our program, the EBITDA, the earnings before income taxes, depreciation, all that stuff, is very high out in this industry. And we have almost like a perfect climate of suitors with a lot of money in the oil business. So once we have taken care of all the EB-5 requirements, which, as you mentioned earlier, could take 2.5 to 3 year range. Once it's been 3.5 years, so we know that there's no pushback on the green card requirements, we want to make sure everybody has finished those requirements, because if you get your money paid back too early, then your money doesn't stay at risk long enough and you're not going to get your green card. And if the job creation hasn't been completed. So we have what's called it's like a buyout option on the EB-5 investor. And before we can exercise that put, the EB-5 investor's requirements have to have been fully met. Okay. Number two, the earliest we can do it is 3.5 years. And if we do it anytime between 3.5 years to 5 years, that buyout is going to total $1 million. The way that works is they're going to be receiving $40,000 dividends annually. At the end of the first year, 40,000. At the end of the second year, 40,000. So by the time they've done the third year, we still haven't exercised the put, but they've received 120,000 in dividends. So the way the put is worded is that we can buy you out for $1 million less dividends received. Okay, so it equates to, it's kind of simple. If it takes 5 years, then you're going to have received on the end of the 5th year, you will have received your 5th dividend, which makes 200,000. We're just paying you back in 5 years your 800,000 plus the 200 you received already in dividends. If it happens in 4 years, you will have received $1 million earlier, like in 4 years. That averages out a little right around 6%. If we do it in 3.5 years, the actual return, you'll get it in 3.5 years, $1 million total, 3 dividends of 120, and then we put up 880. That comes out to 7.15 or something. It's over 7%. So that's how that works. There's a variable there. You can be assured you're going to make a 5% return. You can be assured you're going to get your money paid back, the 800,000. But there's different points in time that those numbers could be different, which are only a better scenario, not a worse scenario. So I hope that.
In fact, some of the earlier clients and investors in this particular project have already received their annual dividend.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I mean, it's
investors from 2024 that
the very early ones,
late in the year, have already received $40,000 dividends. Yes.
I'm going to kind of summarize a couple questions here they're asking about timeline for the EB-5 process again. And then someone else also offered, what's the difference between rural and urban? So if you want to take just a moment again to kind of talk through that issue one more time, but also to mention there's really a distinct difference between urban and rural. And as you mentioned, you are very rural. So what's the timeline look like, comparatively speaking?
Well,
kind of from start to finish
it
again.
looks like I can tell you it's not an exact science, but from what I hear from industry experts, other regional centers, other projects, the time frame for getting approvals in an urban are slower because they do not have what's called priority processing. That I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very important point. When they revised the law, they gave a special preference to rural. Rural had kind of been neglected over the years, and there weren't very many rural projects. And that was back when this program was initiated in 1990. That was a part of the thrust of the goal was to boost, rural communities. So what they did under the new law in 2022 is they said, we're going to do what's called set-asides. And they allocated 20% of the 10,000 EB-5 green cards strictly for rural. And then they allocated 10%, which is 1,000 of the green cards, for TEA urban. Now, what TEA urban is target employment areas that are in big cities, but they have to be in a high unemployment area. And that unemployment area has to be higher than 1.5% of the national ongoing unemployment figures. So they have to get that verified, and that can change. There's been instances to where all of a sudden something happens and the unemployment figures. I'll give you an example. I spent 30 years in Austin, Texas, and part of that time I lived in a small town outside of Austin called Bastrop, and population, it would have qualified for rural. Well, then Elon Musk decided to move his home office there to Bastrop, Texas, and that changed everything. And now Austin has a skyline now almost as comparable to Houston or Dallas. So those are some factors that are kind of unpredictable. Also, the fact that they only receive 1,000 set-asides without priority processing, they are much more likely to create a backlog. And that what I'm hearing on urban TEAs, they've been taking closer to 18 months. I think it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years. I don't have anything exact on that, and that kind of changes as time goes on. But it's going to take you longer than a rural project. And the rural, if the 2,000 are not used up in 1 year, they roll them over to the next year. If they only had 1,000, there'll be 3,000 available the next year. So rural, I know in China and India, and a lot of the bigger players in EB-5, some of them don't want to look at anything other than rural projects. There's other countries, depending on the investor situation, where it's not such a big deal. So.
Well, speaking of other countries, we have a question here, which I think there's a short answer and a longer answer. But is EB-5 open to Iranians and Russians? And let me pick them on that one for a moment. The short answer is yes. The U.S. has typically never really blocked countries from immigration, and although regardless of what the administration recently said, they still haven't done it, and it's pretty difficult for them to do it. But the short answer is Iranians and Russians have always qualified, even though I guess, you can consider them adversaries. But I will say this. There are some challenges for Iranians and Russians in particular, and that will be on the source of funds. Let's say in a perfect world where kind of peace comes around and everyone's kind of friendly again. Source of funds is still a major challenge. I've spoke to a lot of Iranians, just, excellent people, excellent candidates have made money, but, made money legitimately in Iran or in other countries. But moving the money out of the country, that's what they call the path of funds, is very challenging for them. Right? There's such currency restrictions that I think it's going to be very challenging for an Iranian, not because they're Iranian necessarily, but because of the movement of the money and showing how the money was made. Because a lot of Iranians and Russians and Ken, we used to see that a lot in Vietnam and China, where developing economies are, a lot of times are cash economies. That doesn't mean they're, illegal economies or money was made illegally, but sometimes in developing economies, they're cash economies. So it's very important to realize that Russians and Iranians are going to, at very least, get an extra level of scrutiny. They're going to get a second and third look for sure. That say an Indian living in Austin, Texas might not get. But the biggest challenge for them is going to be, I think, is showing the source of funds and the pathway of funds. How they move this money around? Can it be traced? So the short answer is it's still open to Iranians and Russians, but I'm going to say it's going to be really challenging, and not only for political reasons, but just from the structure of the EB-5 program having to show the source and path of funds.
Well, since you're the short answer guy and I'm the long answer guy,
Okay.
I'm going to mention.
That was going to be a long answer.
I'm going to extend your answer a little bit, okay? And that is that I think we should point out that in the very first step in this whole process is we're tied in, and by tied in I mean respectfully, we don't get paid by these lawyers. We don't pay them, and that's the fastest way to lose your bar license in the United States. But these are respected, highly respected law firms and immigration attorneys that we've worked with for years, who most of them are in the top, the placement in the top 25 immigration attorney awards in the industry. And we can arrange an initial consultation. Usually it's 45 minutes, an hour, and there's no obligation, there's no charge. And I would say anyone that's in a real challenging situation, I would urge them to at least go to that step where they can then, and we don't need to be on the call. We can be if you want us to, but we don't usually, some of the time we're not. And if you have a real issue on concerns about source of funds, path of funds, I think that'd be a very worthwhile endeavor, because they're not going to paint a pretty picture and say, oh, no problem, it's going to be fine. And then down the road, you run into a roadblock. So I think that's the first step for anyone that's in that situation. Would you agree, Tyrone?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think it's the first step for almost any client, right? You really want to talk to a lawyer, kind of get a third party objective opinion. I think we try to give an objective opinion, but somebody who will actually represent you. The lawyer represents you and your best interests. So that's a very important step.
And someone with extensive knowledge in the EB-5 program.
Right.
They're specialists. You have to have
people spent 20 years.
We ran into a situation, won't name any names or anything, but the investor got really sidetracked with an immigration attorney who had been to an EB-5 seminar. And so he knew all about EB-5, didn't he?
Yeah. So certainly, and I think anybody we refer you to, you can look up and see they're some of the very best in the industry, and they'll give you the truth. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but they'll be very direct. Brutally direct, because they don't want to take on clients that they don't want to lead you down a path that's not going to be successful. Ultimately, it's too much work and time and money for everybody involved. So, and
they don't want to blemish their track record either.
No, I mean that's the thing. They don't want to be known as a firm that just churns and burns clients. So, hey, we're coming up on an hour, and so I think this is a good time to kind of wrap things up. I'm available. If you have an interest in EB-5, reach out to Holborn or to your advisor directly. We can set up a meeting together with me, and we can discuss your case, kind of your unique and personal case. Then we can do a further call with Ken or with the lawyers, and kind of dig a bit deeper. So again, I urge you to either reach out to Holborn directly, to your advisor directly, or you can reach out to me also, and then we can look at your case and look at if it's the right fit for you and how we can get started. So with that, I'm going to thank Ken Frost for joining us this very early American morning, and And we look forward to hearing from you. And I'm sure Ken will be happy to jump on a call, a Zoom call with you most anytime.